Listen to this list of names for a second. Clark Gable, Humphrey Bogart, Katharine Hepburn. What do they all have in common? Well, they all went on the record calling one specific man the absolute greatest actor of his generation.
Yeah, and he was actually the first person ever to win consecutive Best Actor Academy Awards.
Right. And yet this towering icon of American cinema famously asked, why do actors think they're so goddamn important? Acting is not an important job. Plumbing is.
It's incredible, really. You have a man who fundamentally resented the very art form he completely conquered. So today, we are unearthing how Spencer Tracy's profound inner demons accidentally invented modern acting.
Okay, let's unpack this, because looking at the sources we've gathered, it is like watching a brilliant magician who genuinely despises magic but simply cannot stop pulling rabbits out of hats.
That is exactly what it's like.
And for you listening, whether you are a classic film buff or just someone fascinated by complex human psychology, this deep dive is going to completely change the way you view the concept of, effortless talent. Because his path to Hollywood was, well, it was anything but deliberate. I mean, how does a restless kid from Milwaukee who has no interest in the stage end up as a leading man?
Well, it really started as a series of escapes. Tracy was born in 1900, and he was an intensely hyperactive, difficult child.
Right. And in that era, before we had modern psychological terminology for behavioral issues, his parents simply didn't know what to do with him.
Exactly. So at age 9, they placed him in the care of Dominican nuns, hoping the strict environment would fix his behavior. But by the time World War I broke out, he was 18 and, looking for another escape.
Which is when he and his childhood friend, Pat O'Brien, enlisted in the Navy.
Yeah, but here is the irony. I always picture these classic stars having these grand cinematic war records. But Tracy and O'Brien never even saw the sea.
Wait, really? They never went overseas?
No, they spent the rest of the war at a training station near Chicago, which left Tracy entirely adrift when the war actually ended. So his father pushed him toward a college degree.
Which led him to Ripon College in Wisconsin, and that is where the accidental actor was born, right?
Yes, because he joined the debate team.
Yeah.
Which is a crucial detail here. He later credited debate with teaching him how to speak extemporaneously.
Like how to sound like he was formulating thoughts in real time rather than just reciting memorized text.
Exactly. And then he made his stage debut in a play called The Truth. And suddenly, he had an obsession.
An obsession that landed him in grinding poverty in New York, because he gets a scholarship to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts.
Right, where he and Pat O'Brien are living in a tiny studio apartment, literally surviving on a diet of plain rice and pretzels.
I read they were sharing a single decent suit for auditions. At one point, he was surviving on an allowance of 35 cents a day.
Yeah, he was fighting his way up the stock theater circuit, doing grueling, repetitive work, but then he finally landed a lead role in a Broadway play called Dread.
Which was a heavy drama about a man descending into madness, right?
Right. It previewed in Brooklyn, got a phenomenal reception, and it really looked like his major breakthrough. Except the very next day was October 29th, 1929.
Oh, wow. The stock market crash.
Exactly. Funding for theatrical productions evaporates overnight. The play never makes it to Broadway, and he is back to square one. He almost quits the profession entirely.
But he doesn't, because John Ford, the legendary director, happens to see him in another stage production, The Last Mile, and casts him in his film debut, Up the River, in 1930.
And Fox Film Corporation immediately signed him to a contract based on that.
Okay, I need to stop you there because this is where the narrative usually transitions into a Hollywood happily ever after. But the sources show the complete opposite.
Oh, it was a total disaster.
Right. I mean, he makes 25 films for Fox over 5 years. He's playing the leading man, mostly crooks or con men, and nearly all of those movies lose money.
Yeah, they completely tanked.
Wait, so he was a leading man in 25 movies and still practically unknown? Was it just terrible luck? Or was he actively sabotaging himself? It's like a star quarterback stuck on a team that never wins a single game.
It really is. But the studio system in the early 1930s essentially operated like an assembly line for matinee idols. The industry was built on men who looked like they were sculpted out of marble.
You mean actors like John Barrymore, who relied on heavy theatricality, exaggerated projection, and grand physical posturing?
Exactly. Fox kept putting Tracy in movies because he had this compelling presence, but they were trying to market him as a traditional leading man.
Which he wasn't. He wasn't textbook handsome, and he couldn't posture.
No, he really couldn't. So those early failures at Fox were actually crucial to developing his signature style. Because he wasn't textbook handsome or larger than life, He had to rely on pure instinct.
So those early failures were almost like an athlete training at high altitude. He didn't have the crutch of classic good looks or the ability to strike a heroic pose.
Right. He had to build up his instinctual acting muscles just to survive in those terrible B-movies. That is the perfect analogy. Because he couldn't rely on theatrical tricks, he began developing the mechanics of naturalism.
Which was completely countercultural at the time. I mean, in an era where actors made sure to find their light and project their voices to the back row, Tracy was doing the exact opposite.
He was breaking eye contact in the middle of a scene. He was underreacting to dramatic news. He was stammering slightly, overlapping his dialogue with other actors.
He was developing a gritty, grounded realism that the industry simply didn't know how to sell yet.
And the frustration of being a square peg in a round hole clearly took a massive toll. In 1934, he is scheduled to film a movie called Marie Galante, and he just doesn't show up to set.
Right, the studio sends people to find him, and they discover him in his hotel room, virtually unconscious after a 2-week alcohol bender. Fox immediately fires him.
So you have a father with a family to support, his career is seemingly in ruins, and he carries a reputation as an unreliable alcoholic.
Desperate for money.
Exactly. But the miracle is that he found a lifeline at the most glamorous, pristine studio in town, MGM.
Which makes no sense on paper.
It doesn't, but Irving Thalberg, the legendary producer, saw the raw, unpolished realism Tracy was developing. He realized that audiences were getting tired of the artificial matinee idols.
So Thalberg puts him in a Fritz Lang movie called Fury in 1936. Tracy plays an innocent man who barely escapes a lynch mob. He isn't playing a gangster. He is playing a regular, terrified guy pushed to the absolute brink.
And audiences connected with him on a visceral level. The realism that failed at Fox was suddenly the exact thing the culture was craving.
I mean, the industry coronation happened incredibly fast after that. He wins the Best Actor Oscar for Captain's Courageous in 1937, playing a Portuguese fisherman.
And then the very next year, he wins Best Actor again for Boys Town, playing the real-life Catholic priest, Father Flanagan. Consecutive Oscars.
It's unprecedented.
But the pressure he felt playing Father Flanagan was immense. He was so anxious about representing the church properly that it caused severe insomnia.
Yeah. In a display of extreme humility when he won the Oscar, he felt so profoundly unworthy that he stated in his speech he couldn't accept it.
Right. A second statuette was struck and sent directly to Father Flanagan.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. I am struggling to reconcile this timeline. Tracy is winning Academy Awards for playing absolute moral pillars, literal men of the cloth.
Yeah.
Yet off-screen, he is disappearing on these massive, destructive benders. Did the studio just not care about the hypocrisy, or were they actively complicit in hiding it?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to understand the power of the MGM protection machine in the 1930s. The studio employed dedicated fixers whose entire job was to keep their stars out of the newspapers.
So if Tracy destroyed a hotel room, MGM paid for it before the police were ever called.
Exactly. They protected him because his acting technique was revolutionizing their films.
Yeah.
His co-stars were constantly bewildered by his process.
Like Joan Bennett, who said she never felt like he was acting in a scene. She felt like the situation was simply happening spontaneously.
Yes. He redefined screen acting by doing exactly what he said. He summarized his entire philosophy by quoting Alfred Lunt, saying, "Learn your lines and don't bump into the furniture."
It sounds incredibly dismissive of the craft, but underneath that simple, effortless exterior was a deeply complicated reality. To understand how he mechanically achieved that level of empathy on screen, we have to look at the psychological engine driving his misery.
And that traces back to 1923, when Tracy married an actress named Louise Treadwell. A year later, they had a son named John.
And when John was just 10 months old, Louise discovered that the boy was profoundly deaf.
Right. Now, in the 1920s, a deep Catholic faith often carried an intense burden of cause and effect. Tracy didn't internalize his son's deafness as a random medical tragedy.
No, he viewed it as a direct divine invoice for his own moral failings.
He truly believed his son was being punished by God because of Tracy's own sins. He couldn't shake that conviction.
Right.
He was so devastated by this perceived guilt that he struggled to even be in the same room as the boy.
So the alcoholism wasn't some glamorous Hollywood party habit. It was a severe affliction used to numb that specific guilt.
Exactly. He wasn't a steady, everyday drinker. He was prone to massive, disappearing binges. He suffered from lifelong insomnia.
And to cope, he became dependent on barbiturates just to get to sleep, and then dexedrine just to function on set during the day.
Right. By 1933, he moved out of the family home entirely and started living in hotels. But he never officially divorced Louise.
We always picture these classic movie stars living perfect, glamorous lives in sprawling Beverly Hills mansions. But Tracy was essentially a transient nomad, living out of hotel rooms just to hide his own guilt.
His good friend, the director Joseph L. Mankiewicz, made a profound observation about this dynamic. He said he didn't leave Louise, he left the scene of his guilt.
Wow.
And this visceral, daily understanding of misery translated directly into his acting. That incredibly deep well of pain is exactly what made him so devastatingly human on screen. When you watched Spencer Tracy suffer in a movie, you weren't watching a theatrical technique.
You were watching a man who intimately understood the mechanics of a broken spirit. But an isolated, unmoored star is a massive liability for a movie studio, which creates a vacuum in his life.
A vacuum that was filled in 1941 when he met the woman who would define the rest of his days, Katharine Hepburn.
They met on the set of Woman of the Year, sparking a 26-year relationship that lasted until he died.
And this arrangement was a complete open secret within the industry. The MGM moguls went to unbelievable lengths to protect their stars from controversy.
Right. Tracy and Hepburn never actually lived together until his final years, though their intimate partnership was widely known in Hollywood.
Yes. But I know you're wondering about the power dynamic here.
I am, because I have to ask, why did Hepburn put up with this? You have this fiercely independent feminist icon, a woman who answered to absolutely nobody. Yet she surrenders completely to a man who won't marry her, keeps cheating, and suffers from intense mood swings.
Well, what's fascinating here is that Hepburn saw right past the Hollywood facade to the core of his incurable torture. She recognized both his unmatched genius and his deep misery.
She essentially adopted a nursing role to handle his binges and his crushing depression.
She did. In her autobiography, decades later, she wrote about observing his demon, saying, "What was it? Never at peace, tortured by some sort of guilt, some terrible misery."
She loved him enough to accept that the misery was a permanent, unchangeable part of the package.
Exactly. Even though Tracy's still engaged in affairs with stars like Myrna Loy and Gene Tierney, Hepburn never fought for marriage.
Meanwhile, his estranged wife, Louise Tracy, publicly stated, "I will be Mrs. Spencer Tracy until the day I die." It is an incredibly crowded, tragic, emotional landscape.
And that lifetime of internal stress, combined with the heavy drinking, the barbiturates, and chain smoking, inevitably caught up with his physical body.
So as we move into the 1960s, his health is rapidly declining. But astoundingly, his work somehow only becomes more profound.
Yes, he formed an incredibly tight bond with the director Stanley Kramer, eventually working almost exclusively with him. In 1961, Kramer directed him in Judgment at Nuremberg,
where Tracy plays the chief American judge overseeing the trials of Nazi war criminals. And at the climax of the film, Tracy delivers a 13-minute monologue in a single take.
Delivering 13 unbroken minutes of dialogue on a film set is practically unheard of. It earned a rare, spontaneous round of applause from the entire cast and crew.
The mechanical difficulty of maintaining an emotional arc, hitting your marks, and remembering the text without the safety net of an editing cut is staggering.
But the physical toll was becoming impossible to hide. By the mid-60s, his health was failing entirely. Kidney failure, diabetes, hypertensive heart disease.
It got so bad that Hepburn paused her own legendary career for 2 entire years just to provide round-the-clock care for him.
Which leads directly to his final film, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, in 1967. Again directed by Stanley Kramer, co-starring Katharine Hepburn.
And he was so ill at that point that the studio couldn't secure standard insurance for him. The premium was $71,000, an astronomical sum.
To save the production, Hepburn and Kramer both had to put their own salaries into escrow to cover the insurance just so Tracy could be cleared to work.
The production schedule had to be completely rewritten because he could only manage to work for 2 or 3 hours a day. He was just exhausted.
Right. He finished his final scene on May 24th, 1967. Just 17 days later, he woke up at 3 a.m. to make a cup of tea, suffered a massive heart attack, and died.
And Hepburn found him. She later noted that he looked so happy to be done with living.
Out of respect for his family and the wife he never divorced, Katharine Hepburn did not attend his funeral.
So what does this all mean? Looking at the trajectory from a restless kid in Milwaukee to those final days on set, it's like a marathon runner collapsing right at the finish line, giving literally every ounce of life he had left directly to the camera lens.
He championed a style of acting that completely ignored the vanity of Hollywood. He stripped away the theatrics and did something revolutionary. He actually listened to his co-stars.
Which brings up that incredible anecdote you mentioned earlier.
Oh, right. There's a story about a young rookie actor named Burt Reynolds visiting a set and observing Tracy. Reynolds nervously introduced himself, stating he was an actor. Tracy just looked at him and replied, "An actor. Huh. Just remember not to ever let anyone catch you at it."
Never let anyone catch you at it. And for you, listening to this deep dive right now, I think the biggest takeaway is a reminder that sometimes the most effortless-looking achievements require the heaviest, most agonizing hidden burdens. True mastery often looks completely invisible to the outside world, but it takes a profound toll on the master.
It really does. Which raises an important question that lingers when you look at the entirety of his life and his work.
Yeah.
Did his genius require his pain?
Right. If Spencer Tracy had somehow found a way to forgive himself for his son's deafness, if he had found peace in his personal life, would he still have been the greatest actor of his generation? Or was that unresolvable guilt, that heavy, inescapable sadness, the exact mechanism that made him so flawlessly, devastatingly human when the cameras finally rolled? It forces you to rethink that quote from the beginning when he said acting isn't an important job, plumbing is. Maybe he wasn't just being humble. Maybe, to him, fixing a broken pipe was a clean, solvable problem. You tighten a wrench, the leak stops, and you can go home and sleep peacefully. But when your job is to reach into your own brokenness, to bleed your own guilt out for the cameras just to make a scene feel real, well, maybe you never really get to go home at all.